How are you? Welcome to Tampa Talk with Mary. Welcome to a show that only airs once a month. I guess this little bit is just a Goop update. So I didn't have anybody on to talk about this, but I began watching the show. I know we were like, let's not watch it because we're giving Gwyneth Paltrow, profits and money and attention, and I'm like, yes, like I see that that's kind of what's happening here, but I think the commentary is really important. So that maybe it doesn't happen again, or there's a season two. Um,
So what happens in a workshop?
Everyone gets off.
What the fuck are you doing to people?
What we try to do at Goop is to explore ideas that may seem out there or too scary.
Are you guys ready to go out in the field and make a ruckus?
Just another day at the office.
the episode that I watched is this one where they're talking with this old school feminist. Her name is Betty Dawson. She's 90 years old. And this article from The Guardian is describing her as an old school feminist, and I would describe her that way as well. But she teaches like female masturbation workshops. So especially a woman coming out of her time, like super scandalous, but female sexuality is super important. I didn't have issues with her really at all in the episode. Oh, my cats are fighting. I do, however, have issues with Gwyneth Paltrow feeling like she needs to do like her version of a thing. So in the episode, her and what seems to be just some other employee that works with her at Goop are meeting with Betty, and then Betty's like other co-teacher or teaching assistant, and they're talking about female sexuality. Now, the bit that's from their conversation that made the most news is that Gwyneth Paltrow couldn't identify what the vagina was. She was like, I just thought it was all of it. Which, I get it. Like, in the US, like, the sex education is awful, right? Here's my only gripe, though, is that, one, Gwyneth Paltrow has, and stay with me here, a lot of money. So, and her company, Goop, sells sex toys. So for her to not know the specific part of the female anatomy that is in fact the vagina is a little alarming. Like, I don't think has any reason to not know that. Like, I think that is just straight up ignorance. And I don't know if that was just something that was said in here for shock value or to be funny or what, but it's just so dumb and more importantly dangerous, like, the female anatomy is so incredibly complex and beautiful, and for you to want to advertise or sell products for that specific thing to not know or fully understand the anatomy itself is really bad. It's really bad. So Betty Dawson corrects her right away. I didn't know about her really at all until watching this episode. I thought she was really fascinating. I really liked her a lot. She does these workshops where, like, all the women that sign up for the workshop are completely naked the whole time, and they're learning how to masturbate. Which, when she talks about it, Gwyneth Paltrow almost, like, shames right away. She's like, oh my gosh, like, I would never do something like that. So that kind of segues her into what we kind of talked about in that first episode we were talking about Goop, is that she does a Goopified version of whatever the literal thing is that she brings on. So in a way, she kind of does that, where she does this Goopified version where she does her own workshop with people in her company just talking about female sexuality, and they bring in some random ass doula and they just start talking about it. And throughout the episode they're cutting like back and forth between her conversation with Betty and then her employees doing the workshop that they themselves have created. So they're not an authority of any kind on this. Clearly, if Gwyneth Paltrow doesn't, at least at first, didn't understand that the vagina was just the birth canal and not like the whole thing. So for her to be like, we're gonna do a Goop version seems a little ridiculous. But Betty in the workshops talks about like the shame that's associated around female sexuality, which I agree with. And the stigmatization of that, which I agree with. There's a lot of shame around that. I think that Gwyneth's like company being involved with that dialogue though is dangerous in that you like she responds to the social shame by like completely responding in total opposite opposition. So which like I think these are two different extremes. So like completely and utterly shaming women's sexuality, and then the other extreme is just like fucking exploding all over the place, where I don't, and then forcing people to accept it, which I understand, but there's a way to do it, and that's ultimately through education, which clearly Gwyneth Paltrow needs. So, like, when we're all the stuff that she's doing in the workshops is great, because women are getting educated on one, how their anatomy works to invite pleasure or to make sex more pleasurable and intimate experience. And, you know, she's, you know, been married for a really long time, and, you know, that kind of intimacy with her husband was a big part of it. So I thought that was really great. And that part of it was including how to communicate making your sexual experience with a partner pleasurable, which I think anybody can use regardless of your like social backgrounds or your relationship to sex. Like, I think no one should be leaving a sexual encounter disappointed or shamed or like dirty. That's why we have all these awful things like rape and all this stuff, or these are awful, I mean, that's an extreme obviously, but like awful encounters with sex, and it's because we don't know how to communicate because we've been so shamed into even talking about it at all. So it brought awareness to that, but then it like threw all this other shit on top. So something she was doing is she was cutting back and forth between the actual workshop that Betty does and then her Goopified version of the workshop, is she's throwing out these like title slides with statistics like throughout the episode, and there's no source. Like, there's no source for any of the statistics, and it's like, almost, like, I'm trying to, like, bring it to quote, but, like, there were certain things they were talking about, like, say, female mutilation, and the context that they talked about it in the episode really made me upset, because I think there's a serious dialogue around the shame around female anatomy that cuts so deep into, say, other countries that, circumcise women, and it's deliberately for making sex easier for men. There are certain religious practices that justify that. There's certain countries that promote that, and there's not enough discussion around that, and I think she had an opportunity in this moment in the episode where they were kind of already on that to bring it to that instead of making it about. Like, I think this is why like white feminism is still separated from intersectional feminism, when intersectional feminism should just be feminism in general. Like, it's because she took a problem that's directly affecting, you know, someone that's unlike her or her community, and then making it about people like her or herself. And that's very dangerous. So completely missed opportunity to do that. In the Goop workshop, they had this other doula that was like, you know, talking about like shame and all this stuff, and I get it, I agree. But there was one point specifically where they were talking about communicating during like a sexual encounter with your partner, how to get pleasure. And the way that the doula described it was like, it's okay to say that, no, you didn't really do a good job, but that's okay, and we don't have to like continue this right now. Like, the way it was phrased, it made it sound like you don't communicate what's wrong with you until the end of the sexual encounter. And then it's like, well, for next time, we're going to do this. Which does not make any sense to me, because I think that plays into the shame. Like, you literally have to feel the shame and then communicate after the fact. When I think that sexual encounters, they're not silent. Like, no one, you're not like, you don't have to not talk to each other during, you know, like sex or making out or whatever. Like, I think what should have happened in that moment is communicating, like, as it's happening, you know, this is working for me, this is not working for me, let's try something else. Like, in the moment. Because even, like, thinking of your partner is that if they're trying to do all this stuff and it just doesn't work, and then you give up, and then you say after the fact, like, you weren't great, but that's okay, we don't have to, like, do this anymore. Like, I think that also, you gotta think about how the other person is feeling, is that if they're legitimately trying to, you know, make you orgasm or get this intimate connection with you, and you're just not communicating in the moment, and then you say after the fact, like, like that probably makes the other person feel like shit, So the way it was described is that you don't communicate until the end, and then you kind of give like a performance review where it should be happening in the moment. I don't know. And I get that that's, especially for women, that's really uncomfortable to communicate that, but you have to break through that mold and have other people around you say, it's okay. And then being with someone that makes you feel like, this is okay for me to do. Because, yeah, I think it's harder to, come outright and say how you're feeling in a sexual moment because it's like as it's happening. But putting yourself in a place where you're vulnerable, you're already vulnerable with somebody, so you should be able to like, say how you feel about anything at any given moment. You're literally being naked with them. That's like the pinnacle of vulnerability. So evaluating like why maybe I don't feel like I could talk with this person is really important. But they don't talk about it at all. There's also this bit where they, as an exercise, they take pictures of each other and like selfies, and they have to pick out like which picture they liked best. I don't really think that needs to be in the context of a workshop. I think that's something that you could do with your friends. I think that kind of getting to the getting deeper to that is just the ideals of beauty, and that there should be a dialogue around, loving yourself and also not being vain, and that the societal constructs of beauty, like what is considered beautiful, is changing all the time, like of what is considered most popular or hot right now. Like you could literally use art to, this is something I wish that she said in their Goopified workshop, is that you can look at the history of like all types of art forms, right? And how women are depicted. And that is an indication of like what the society, either that specific society or the specific society at that time considers beautiful. And just watch how it changes over time. Like it's always changing, it's always different. So we have this conversation about beauty where it's like there is no like fixed thing of this is the pinnacle of beautiful, and bringing women and men and anybody that's, say non-binary or non-gender or trans or whatever, bringing awareness to that beauty it really isn't, it's subjective. Like, but you have to be able to see yourself as beautiful beyond your physical form. There's things that you bring to yourself that make you beautiful, like your personality qualities and, the way you treat others and like your passions and stuff, that makes you beautiful. And then that shows through your physical form. So I think there's like a deeperness to like, let's look at some pictures and you have to decide like which one you like best. Because we do that all the time. We're conditioned in a society of Instagram and shit to decide which picture of us looks best. Is that we have to get to the deeper root of the problem of that is, why don't I want to post pictures of myself? Why don't I want to be seen? And that was completely missed in the workshop. Like there was a woman who works at the company who was talking about like trying to have better intimacy or a better ideal of herself with her husband. And we like never touched on that, like at all. But all the great stuff that Betty's talking about is like not the majority of the episode. The majority of it is like the Goop version, which in this, they're already setting that Betty is the expert. And like, I agreed. I was like, yes, Betty is the expert. And then they don't give her enough time. It's crazy. So some major takeaways so far is that I obviously am coming into this with my own ideas about, feminism and female sexuality and orgasms and all, and masturbation and all this stuff. Is that, well, one, Gwyneth Paltrow should know better. She has the resources to be educated. And this is the white privilege bullshit that we see all the time, is that there are so many people that could be in her place and have access to education and all these great resources. And she has the power to, one, use those resources for herself, and then 2, use her platform, her multi-million-dollar platform, to be, you know, people that perpetuate truth, factual information, and educate people. Like, she has the power to do that and deliberately chooses not to. And instead, sells products for sexual pleasure when she doesn't know what the fucking vagina is. Like, that makes me so fucking mad. Like, that's ridiculous. That's obscene. And that's just the power of wealth and, like, you know, just having money and you can do whatever you want with it. It's ridiculous. So she should be using her resources to be educating people on factual information and chooses not to. And that's a big issue. And including the fact that she does have access to information that's factually true. We see it in the episode and then deliberately chooses not to make that like a huge, huge pinnacle of the episode. Yeah, I don't get that. I really don't. Second, I hate this idea that she keeps perpetuating the Goopified version, as if that she and her company have, this ability to say, like, this is, like, what you should be striving for, but, like, this is where we got it from. Like, I don't think that you have to decide the Goop version or this version. I don't think there should be any version. I think that Goop should just use their lifestyle brand to advocate factual information. This is how you, I mean, just from a business standpoint, you're developing multiple partnerships with people, which she kind of already does, but I don't understand why she doesn't do that with information. Like, why couldn't Betty do an educational workshop at Goop? Like, I don't think they needed to bring in somebody else that they already liked to do things that they're already comfortable with. Like, they're not learning new information, they're just perpetuating the bullshit that they already know. So again, that comes back to she has the power to be educated, has the resources to be educated, and then is deliberately choosing to go in opposition to it. That doesn't make sense. And then my big takeaway overall, and that the big lesson here, is that there are people who are constantly telling women what they can or cannot do with their bodies, their sexuality, you know, their personalities, their beauty, all the time, and that it even comes from women, and that it comes from the community that is, you know, affected by it. And that it goes beyond women. Knowing that you are beautiful because you're a human and that you're loved, it, like, should be the foundation of what is considered beautiful. Everyone is beautiful. We all start at that baseline because we have human integrity. So, you know, if you feel like you need to, validate your beauty by getting out of your comfort zone and posting pictures of yourself, do it, you know? Getting involved in charitable acts, like things that are beyond you, if you have any kind of platform, using it to bring awareness to social issues or, you know, social change, is the most important thing to do.